and welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. We have a little different of an episode today that we're kind of excited about, talking about hunting and pop culture, and going to go over some movies that kind of have a little bit of hunting in them, but also some really good, I think, books that discuss hunting, but really focus on kind of the history and the ethics of hunting. So quite a good episode. But before we dive in, we do want to just kind of go over a few news updates and a few different reminders that are kind of time pertinent. So if you're interested in obtaining a deer lottery permit for next firearm or muzzleloader season, that first application period is currently open right now. You have until the end of April, so April 31st, until that deadline closes for that first lottery application. So you've still got some time, but definitely put it on your radar. Be thinking about it if you're interested in trying to obtain, like I said, a firearm or muzzleloader deer permit for Illinois. Now's the time. Now, this first lottery application is only for residents only, and the second lottery application is then when non-residents can apply. So as long as you're a resident, you can go ahead and submit your application for this first period. So good luck. A few other kind of deadlines that are kind of important to mention. March 31st is kind of the expiration date for your 2022 hunting, trapping, and fishing licenses. So those are getting ready to expire. So it's about that time to go back and purchase your 2023. Hard to believe already, isn't it, Curtis? We're already thinking about the next year's license season, but man, it happens quick.
Oh yeah, the time she flies.
That it does. So if you're interested, again, go to DNR's website. You could purchase it through their exploremoreillinois.com, or you can visit any licensed vendor and get your up-to-date license, whether it's hunting, trapping, or fishing. And again, you're supporting directly conservation efforts on the ground in Illinois by purchasing those licenses. So thank you for that. A couple other updates. You want to tell us a little bit about beaver and otter trapping season, as that's getting ready to wrap up here shortly.
Yeah, it's one of the last running seasons that we have. The beaver and otter, the water trapping season will end with the end of March, so everything's got to be pulled out as March goes out. And we actually had a workshop this past weekend. We dealt with some cold weather because, as everybody knows, Illinois, I seen something posted online. It feels like we're in a custody battle between winter and spring, who's trying to get custody of us, and keeps going back and forth. So you don't know if you're going outside, if you need your suntan lotion and your bug spray or your big heavy coat. And I think we experienced all four seasons while we were out there.
I think so.
Setting some beaver traps. So unfortunately, a lot of our traps froze up. We caught some ice, and that's about it. But that's the way it goes. But for those of you that are out there still contending with the weather, just a few days left, so good luck. As you know, beaver and otter season be all done at the end of March. If you are lucky enough to catch an otter, don't forget you got to get that registered within 48 hours. They'll send you out that CITES tag. And in Illinois, we're allowed 5 otters, so pretty cool. We saw some otter sign, we saw some beaver sign, we saw some mink sign, we saw a lot of cool stuff while we were out there. We didn't have a trap fired, but we still had a good time, I think.
I had a good time. People learned a lot and got to see, like you said, a ton of really fresh, really good looking sign. It was fun.
For sure. And a huge shout out to Neil Graves from the Illinois Trappers Association. He came out, he shared his enthusiasm and his knowledge for trapping, and it was a cold weekend for him too, and he was out there with us both days and loving every minute of it. So really appreciate him coming out there and showing people just how enthused people get about trapping, even when the weather's cruddy and even when you don't make a single catch. He had as big a smile on his face as anybody.
He did, yeah.
There doing it. So big thanks to him and the Illinois Trappers Association to helping us out with that.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Curtis. And one more kind of important, not necessarily a reminder, or a deadline, but spring turkey season is just around the corner. I know the youths are going to be at it here shortly. They get the kind of first run of the place. So if you're taking out a youth in the next weekend or two, good luck. I hope you have a successful hunt. Whatever you deem as successful, whether it's harvesting a bird or just spending some quality time with your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your grandkids, whatever. But good luck out there. Stay safe, and it should be a productive season, I think, is assuming the weather holds. It's a little iffy at this point. Hopefully we really start to get some warm weather that really starts to fire these birds up a little bit, but it's been kind of cold, dreary, and wet across much of Illinois. So we'll see.
A lot of mud.
A lot of mud. But with that, we'll kind of break into the main topic for discussion. Like we said, we just wanted to have, a quick discussion about hunting in pop culture. We get a lot of requests, whether it's book requests, video requests of people, interested in taking that next step and learning about the historical side of hunting, how important hunting was to basically the foundation of this country. So we have a few book recommendations that I have put together. I know Curtis has a few that he can kind of chime in with, as well as some of the movies. So if you want to kind of start and take it away, Curtis, with a movie or two, and we'll kind of bop back and forth between movies and books. And
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is an excellent time of year to be thinking about this because we just talked about it. All the seasons pretty much winding down. Turkey season's not quite ready to kick off. So some of you out there may be twiddling your thumbs and wondering what's the best thing to do. And maybe this is a good time to sit down with a nice book and a nice movie, and enjoy that for everything that it offers. And if that can tie back to hunting or trapping or the outdoors in some way, all the better, right? So hopefully we got some suggestions here that you may want to check out, especially right now in this slow time between seasons. And first thing I want to mention is, have you ever seen a bad hunting movie, a movie that you would consider bad, and maybe you don't want to recommend it to somebody? Basically, coming from your hunting background, does anything come to mind?
there's a few out there. I don't know that I could come up with a title off the top of my head, but there's certainly a few that you watch and you're like, well, that's not necessarily the image portrayed at hunting. But again, a lot of them have some kind of comedic aspect to it that, kind of brings it full circle.
Sure, yeah, and so some of that, like, yeah, I got a couple movies on my list that I actually like that maybe portray hunters in a weird way. Like one, for example, Escanaba into Moonlight.
Uh-huh.
I like that movie. It's funny.
It's
It's
funny.
poking funny. It's poking fun at hunters, in a lighthearted way. But I like that one. But no, the one that comes to my mind is what I like unanimously consider the worst like outdoors movie ever is The Gray with Liam Neeson. This was a movie I was excited about because Liam Neeson was like at the height of his
And the,
popularity.
the trailer looked fantastic when it first launched.
Trailer looked awesome. It's like, oh, it's gonna be Liam Neeson in
Yeah.
the woods, like survival situation like this. There's a lot of I remember when I was a kid reading the book Hatchet, which maybe is a book that
Uh,
you're gonna talk about, but awesome book about that wilderness survival for younger people. But the entire book was about how these or not book movie was about how these wolves just harbored a grudge against Liam Neeson and basically tried to kill him for no apparent reason.
no reason.
It made absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it's like I know the big bad wolf has been a character in our history for a long, long, long time. I get it, but yeah, that movie missed for me. It wasn't realistic. Certainly, wolves can be dangerous animals, not something to take lighthearted. But I'm pretty sure it's only humans and occasionally badgers that harbor grudges for revenge. Never seen a wolf do that, or most animals that are out there trying hard to survive. They're more reactionary instead of plotting against Liam Neeson out there in the Montana wilderness or wherever he was.
It's certainly an interesting movie. I remember the first time I watched it, I had just such good high hopes. Again, like we talked about, the trailer looked dynamite. It was coming out, like you said, at a time when Liam Neeson was really at the height of his popularity, probably. And it really flopped, and it was kind of, sad. But such is life.
Yeah, so that's a bad one. Don't check that one out.
Yeah,
But
pass.
if you're looking for a movie like that that's not bad, The Revenant is a good option, and this is a movie and a book, both options, that's based off a true story, that happened to an American frontiersman, and there were some famous people involved with that, including one of my favorite trappers of all time, Jim Bridger, probably one of the most famous American mountain man, fur trader types, to ever have existed. He was on that expedition and actually left Hugh Glass for dead. That then came back to bite him when they found out he wasn't dead.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in Jim Bridger's defense, I think he was only like 17 years old at that time. So I think a teenager out in the wilderness, during that date of the American frontier, we can we can look past the mistake of leaving Hugh Glass and thinking he was dead,
Sure.
and him coming back to life. But really good story, a lot of action in there. The movie's good. It's obviously Leonardo DiCaprio, so a big star. You don't have to convince people too much to watch a movie with him in it. He's a good actor. And that's a really good one. And for me, that's like what The Gray, the
Should have
indicates
been.
it was supposed to be,
Yeah.
but it wasn't.
Yep. I agree. That's a good one.
That's a good one. And if you're looking for lighthearted, I mentioned it before, but Escanaba into Moonlight is a really just hilarious take on northern Great Lake states hunters, and this happens in the UP. And it's Jeff Daniels. It's a good story.
It
It's
is. And
funny.
if you've
It's
ever met
silly.
somebody from that area, they really play into those stereotypes and really, I mean, they almost nail it. It's quite good.
It's good. Yeah, I do know several people in the Wisconsin, Michigan area that it's like every year they have to watch that at the beginning of deer season. And
Oh,
on bear
sure.
camp, that's what you're watching the day before opening day, and as they're sitting there playing cribbage and doing whatever else they do,
And
it's
probably listening to that old song, what is it? The 30 Point Buck.
yeah, something like that. So really, it's one of those that's kind of poking fun at hunters, but it's a lot of fun. It's there you'll find yourself repeating lots of little catchphrases from that movie, and yeah, once you watch it once, you'll be like, wow, I, movies that silly didn't exist at that time. I
For
feel,
sure.
which made it really weird. Like nowadays, maybe some are made like that, but this was a really silly movie for when it came out. I think it was 91.
Oh,
No,
I didn't realize it was that early. Wow.
2001,
Yeah.
2001. So,
Oh, okay.
um, yeah, really cool movie. Good one to check out. And some others that I kind of wrote down that are really cool. There's a documentary movie on Netflix called Happy People: A Year in the Taiga, and it follows basically these Siberian trapper, like their subsistence livers.
Hmm.
They live off the land, so they're trapping, they're hunting, they're fishing, and it just follows them for an extended period of time. And it's a really cool documentary. Get to see how a different culture lives and how basically their whole life and livelihood is tied into the outdoors, which is really cool and something you don't see a whole lot in today's world. But in some places, it's still alive and well. So that's another one I really like.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to add that to my list. That sounds
That's a good one.
interesting.
But now I've got my two favorites left, so maybe we'll switch over to you and let's talk about some books before I get to my top two.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
We'll start off with probably the one that I would expect most people to expect to be on this list, and that is a Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. It is arguably, in my opinion, probably one of the most influential pieces of written content towards hunting and towards conservation. And it really takes this, it's not really a book per se, it's more a collection of various essays that Aldo Leopold wrote during his time. And if you're unfamiliar with Aldo Leopold, he is widely kind of renowned as the father of modern conservation. He was around in the 30s when the big conservation boom really started to happen. And it's essentially just a collection of his thoughts over time. And there's to me, some very impactful essays in a Sand County Almanac. My probably favorite one, and the one I try to read, fairly regularly, about every year or so, is Thinking Like a Mountain. And it really takes this holistic approach of conservation, of wildlife management, but also uses it under the lens of that animal in and of itself, rather than just looking at, this totality, this very minute. I'm doing kind of a bad job of explaining this, but this very kind of microcosm level of an individual species. And he proposes we take this holistic look at conservation, how the habitat interacts with the wildlife, how the predators interact with the prey, and uses a lot of these different kind of thoughts to really develop what he kind of termed the land ethic. And that's kind of one of the big things that came out of this original publication of these essays, was this land ethic and how important it is for us to maintain it in a sustainable resource way, so that we continue to have these resources over time. But it's a really well written piece. He has a unique way of writing that I would almost describe as poetic in some instances. It's very well written. It's a very short read, and again, it's not a big book. So if you want to just grab it, read an essay or two every now and again, it's perfect for that. So that's definitely my number one
And
recommendation.
you went right to the finale, going
I
right to the
know.
Sand County. You can't top that.
No, but I've got some ones that I don't think many people have heard of, so I kind of wanted to tease those
Okay.
out a little bit. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna say, man, you're going right for the big guns. Yeah, that's for me. That's the tops. I've
It is the top. Yeah,
every right now. If I go back to my desk, there's always a copy within reach. And every desk I've ever had, I've always had a copy of the Sand County Almanac within reach. Because, to me, it's poetry, and it's
it is.
poetry. It's poetry that you basically it's as deep as it gets. The depth is it's basically unlimited. The more you read it, the more you find out, and every word has meaning.
Every word.
And
Yeah.
it's wow, it just really gives you the feels. And yeah, anytime you need a little bit of inspiration, you can grab that book and literally flip to any page. It doesn't matter, middle,
Doesn't matter.
beginning, end. Start reading somewhere, and I promise you, within 3 minutes, you are going to feel 100% different. And there's not too many books that can do that. Sand County Almanac is it. Take the challenge. Just grab a book off the shelf anywhere. Start reading. Before you get to the end of the page, you're gonna be affected somewhere in the feelings. I promise you that. It's a good one.
It is, and if you're really interested after you read, I recommend reading this first before I'm going to throw in a little movie recommendation here, Curtis. I recommend reading a Sand County Almanac before you watch the movie that I'm going to recommend. But a few years back, it's probably been a decade or so now. There was a movie called Green Fire, which really dove into Aldo Leopold and into a Sand County Almanac and looked at some of these more impactful essays. So if you're a person that prefers video content over written content, you can probably find a copy of that documentary somewhere on the interwebs. If you just search Green Fire Aldo Leopold, you should be able to track that down. But highly recommend. All right, now we'll take it a little more historical, I guess. This next book is one that I actually just finished reading. It's called, sorry, looking at my notes here, The Fair Chase: The Epic Story of Hunting in America by Philip Dre. And what I really like about this specific book, rather than a lot of the other books that dive into the history of hunting, in a lot of those cases, they tend to start in kind of the 1930s when conservation really started to take off. But what I find interesting is what occurred before that and beyond that. And this book by Philip Dre really takes, again, this holistic approach of looking at how hunting influenced America, but more importantly, how critical the role that hunters play towards conservation and towards stewards of the landscape is. And it's just really this, I think, impactful book that everybody should read. Again, it starts from basically the first expansion of the United States all the way through the Boone and Crockett era, through the 1930s with the passage of Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson, and the Lacey Act was obviously another big one. But again, it just really views hunting as American history, which I find very intriguing. And I've got another recommendation that kind of piggybacks off this, called Fur, Fortune, and Empire: The Epic History of the Fur Trade in America. And this is by Eric Dolan. It's a similar concept to the epic story of hunting by Philip Dre, but again, it focuses on kind of fur bearer and trapping. But what I find really interesting is how they dive really into kind of the economic boom that really started to take hold of the fur trade. And so it starts way back when, again, prior to early colonization, but it really starts to talk about how the fur trade really was kind of the fundamental catalyst for the North American economy, which I just find really fascinating. Basically, the whole book can be summed up that America was built on the back of the beaver. And it also, as the book progresses, it turns to some geopolitical discussions that really highlight how some geopolitical entities started to, for lack of a better term, take hold of the fur trade and really start to exploit these resources that then led to, that 1930s conservation boom. So excellent book. I can't recommend it enough. It is a little bit of a slower read just because it's very historical. It uses a lot of, historical accounts and data. So it's not the easiest read in the world, but one that I highly recommend.
Yeah, and along those lines of a historical read that is a little bit longer, but just really cool, is Undaunted Courage is a book I read a few years ago. It's been a little while. I had to look up the author here, but it's by Stephen Ambrose. And basically, this is the collection of journal writings from the Lewis and Clark expedition. So if you've ever wanted to get just a little bitty taste of what America was like back then, you get it from that book. And it's another one it's a long read, and sometimes they're using language that's a little bit vestigial, so it might be a little bit hard to understand, but there's some awesome tidbits in that book. And if you're interested in history, really worth checking out, even if you don't read it from cover to cover. Just spot reading sections in there is really cool and gives you that little taste of what America was like, a couple hundred
Sure.
years ago.
No, that's a good one. Up next is a book that I think every hunter should read. Very, very short, very small, and a very quick read. But this is Beyond Fair Chase by Jim Posewitz. I would argue most people have probably at least heard of this book or at least seen it around the store. You can normally find this for just a few dollars. So very cheap book, very quick and easy read. But essentially, this really dives into kind of the ethics of hunting and how this concept of fair chase applies to how we hunt today. But it also kind of wraps up with a discussion on how basically hunting is still relevant in modern society. And I think that's an interesting anecdote that a lot of books about hunting, they tend to end at kind of the 60s and 70s. There's not a lot of content that stems into recent times, but this one does it quite well and really starts to dive into this concept of fair chase and whether or not hunting will or should kind of remain a big portion of American culture moving forward. So definitely recommend. He also does have a few other books in this series. I'm kind of blanking on the names at the moment, but Jim Posewitz is a fantastic author. So highly, highly recommend Beyond Fair Chase.
And another one I like, kind of along those same lines, that sort of chronicles what we were talking about earlier, is the history of humans' relationships with wolves. And to me, this is really fascinating because this history is really cool. There's a lot of bad stuff in there, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there. And at the root, both humans and wolves are social hunters, and we were supposed to be cursorial social hunters. So actually, wolves and humans kind of evolved to hunt the exact same way, um, which is really cool. And even in Wisconsin, I got to hear some of the Native Americans share some of their stories, and in some of their creation stories, it's the wolves and the humans are brothers.
Mm.
They're the same. And so what happens to one is what happens to the other. And it really cool stories, a lot of ways to tie it in. But this book is called Of Wolves and Men by Barry Lopez. Um, Really cool book that just kind of explores that relationship through time, but then also looks at the similarities and he actually goes to some cultures like the Inupiats in northern Alaska and watches them hunt and realizes that still today they hunt almost exactly like a pack of wolves. Even so much so as using sign language and gestures to communicate on the hunt as to not alert the prey, which is the same thing wolves do by changing the way they hold their tail or their mouth and communicating on the hunt without making a noise. Which really cool stuff, interesting books. And yeah, Barry Lopez of Wolves and Men, definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I haven't even heard of that one before. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and definitely just drawing that similarity with how we hunt. That
Sure, sure.
you
No,
see how
that's
a long
interesting.
time
Yeah.
ago we made friends. Like, yeah, you're doing that, I'm doing that. Maybe
Yeah.
we should team up. And nowadays you got people out there running dogs and hunting, so it worked out.
You bet. Oh, I've got one more book, and then we can kind of get back to a few of your movies. This one is not necessarily on hunting or, conservation, but I think it's something that, excuse me, as hunters, we should all be, I think, extremely cognizant about. And this book is called The Nature of Oaks, The Rich Ecology of Our Most Essential Native Trees. And this is a book written by Douglas Tallamy. He's got several different books. He's a botanist that really focuses on kind of bringing nature home. And so he's got a couple different books that focus on, urban gardening and native plant gardening. But this book, The Nature of Oaks, it's a very light read. It's a very easy read. But if you're unfamiliar, in the past decade or two, there's been quite a bit of what people have termed oak decline, where we're starting to see some of our most healthy oak stands and oak trees really start to die off. And for a while, there was substantial, research and effort going into this because they couldn't figure out what's causing this decline. And so I think it's a really interesting kind of just firsthand account of how important oaks are to our native ecosystems here. If you're familiar with the tree, the American chestnut, Castanea dentata, I think is the scientific name. That was once the most prolific tree across much of the kind of Midwest and a little bit to the east, and that tree has basically entirely been wiped out. There's some kind of chestnut blight. It's a type of fungus that basically kills all chestnut trees. And at current, they can only live to about 10 or 20 years in the wild before they become susceptible and die off. And so I think this is just another really interesting account looking at the oaks, especially since we're in this time of a little bit of oak decline. I think it paints a really good picture of how important oaks are to not only wildlife but also to us as humans and to society at large. So definitely a worthwhile read. I could not put it down. I ended up reading the whole thing in about 2 or 3 days. It was that quick of a read, that easy of a read, but also quite thought-provoking at the same time.
Nice. Gotta love that. And this, like
Yeah,
you said, this is the good time of year. Just
you
sit out
bet.
in the mud and freeze and rain for a few days and open a nice book.
Yeah, I do have one more that I'll kind of mention. I don't have it here on my list, but I just finished reading it a few weeks ago. That's American Buffalo by Steve Ranella of the Meat Eater crew. You may have read this as well, Curtis, but if you're interested in the American bison, it's kind of this unique depiction of basically Steve Ranella drew his first American bison tag, and so he goes on an American bison hunt. And the book is kind of a narrative of this hunt, but he does it bringing in historical accounts, historical data, and really starts to tie it all into to how important, again, the American bison was to to the West, to the landscape, to the habitats, as well as to society at large. So another one I kind of recommend is American Buffalo by Steve Ranella. Pretty good book.
Yeah, it was a pretty good one, and yeah, I gotta say it was a good one. I'm not big on promoting Ranella at the current juncture, but that is a good book. It's a
Mhm.
good read. It's really interesting, even so much as like the Buffalo nickel.
Yes,
Essentially,
yes.
frontiers people could look at that nickel and could tell that it was a captive bison because it held its head low. Like,
That's
that's
fascinating.
just amazing to me.
Yeah.
Those little tidbits that you get when you read books that are connected to history, those are things that'll be lost if you don't read them in things like that. And that's just a cool little tidbit that I never would have thought of.
For sure. I love that, connection that people have with wildlife, and that's a great example of it right there. That's perfect.
For sure. And then one other book I just want to mention that's not necessarily hunting related, but outdoor related. And this one is birding, specifically bird watching. It's by Ken Kaufman, really good birder called Kingbird Highway. And this is definitely one. Anybody who's ever been interested in birds, this is a fun read. It's a short, quick read. Can't remember how many pages it is, but you can definitely get it done in just a day or two. And it chronicles Ken Kaufman's attempt to break the big year record, which at that time was held by Pete. Oh, I'll think of his name here in a second, but he did it all by hitchhiking. So he was a young kid in college, and he hitchhiked all around the country, including to Alaska, to try to break the Ted Parker's big year record. That's it. And so he had a lot of interactions with Ted Parker, and really cool, good stories, quick read, talks about birding and hitchhiking all across America, and not hunting related per se, but definitely outdoors, and gives you that little bit of the history too, because it was done in, I believe, the 70s. So get to hear some of what was going on in the natural world in the 70s as he's out exploring these places looking for birds.
That sounds good. There's, this whole collection of books out there that really focus on what we can consider, birding's obviously a fairly popular activity, but let's just say, for lack of a better term, a very niche audience and their relationship to the environment, to wildlife. Little anecdotes like that are fascinating. I love seeing, these little groups just have this connection that I could not imagine. I could not imagine, hitchhiking across the country to try to, beat a record of seeing the most bird species in a year. I mean, just hearing those stories, that's intriguing. That's cool.
Different time for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Don't think you could get by
I don't
the
think you
same
could. You
way
could
these
certainly try
days.
it, but you probably wouldn't make it too
Maybe
far.
nowadays it would be Uber,
Yeah.
super and all
The
around.
uber
That
big
would be
year.
expensive. Yeah, well, okay. So for movies, I gotta get to what I think are the top two now. And so one I gotta mention, honorable mention. This is in a lot of people's tops, but Dances with Wolves. Not necessarily, obviously, rotating around hunting, but definitely about using the land, living at a time when you had to hunt and trap and all that to survive. People are wearing furs. So Dances of Wolves almost makes the list. To me, there's not enough kind of hunting related to get into the top two, but I gotta say, it's hard for me to pick a favorite. But the first one I'm gonna mention is Jeremiah Johnson. This is an old movie. It's with Robert Redford, and he's playing. It's kind of loosely tied to real life events. Liver eating Johnson, old frontiersman. So again, there's some tie into some actual history, but it's a really good story. Everybody, even if you haven't seen this movie, you've probably seen the memes.
Oh
If
yeah,
you notice,
yeah.
there's a lot of popular memes, like Robert Redford just doing the nodding thing is a really popular one. Really good movie. Definitely will get you sort of excited about getting outdoors and hunting and trapping and doing that sort of thing. And so many funny one-liners. Like
Yes, yes.
you'll definitely catch yourself, saying stuff on there, whether it's "Can you skin Grizz" or something along those lines. But some great one-liners in there.
That's honestly out of the movies you've mentioned thus far, that's probably the one I've rewatched, I'd say the most times. It's that good. It has rewatchability. It's got Robert Redford, so it's got a good cast to it. It's got a good story. It's shot well. It's a very good movie.
The dialogue is simple, but it's
Mhm.
actually dense, because there's a lot of frontiersman jokes like worked into the dialogue, even though the dialogue, like the whole dialogue for the whole movie is probably written on 2 pages somewhere. It's not a whole lot, but it's some good stuff in there. So definitely funny and
Mhm.
get you excited to go out. But I
And you can
think
normally catch that one on TV occasionally. I've been flipping around and seen it on quite a few times.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's on something, maybe Netflix or I don't know where it
It's
is.
hard to keep track these days. They're on for a
Yeah,
month and then they're off, and yeah.
but check. I'm sure it'll be up there. It's old enough that it gets cycled through pretty often.
Mhm.
But the other movie I want to mention that's also in my top two, that this one is not really funny at all, but this is more of the like just hunting feel good story, and this is The Ghost in the Darkness. Have you ever seen that one?
I have not.
Okay, so this is a good movie. This is I'd have to look to see when it came out, but this is based on a true story. This was basically a couple of lions in Africa that kind of became niche human hunters. Okay. So these lions were killing a whole bunch of people, and they had to wage war on these lions. And they had to go out and get some serious hardcore hunters to come in and try to hunt these lions. And it turned into this. Well, yeah, I don't want to give away the story, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's an epic battle between good and evil. And
Interesting.
true story, yeah. These lions actually, last I heard, they were mounted, taxidermied, and they used to be in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
The Smithsonian Institute were the two lions that inspired the movie The Ghost in the
Oh, that's
Darkness.
neat.
But yeah, this is one that's not funny at all. It's a good movie. It'll have you on the edge of your seat. And yeah, it's good versus evil. And in the end, I'll let you know the hunter wins, but it's not without many tears shed. And so that's a good one. And the whole family will like that movie. It's a good one. The Ghost in the Darkness. Check it out.
Nice. Have to add that one to the list too. There's so many, so many.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we could have mentioned a lot more. Those are some of our favorites,
Yeah,
but
I mean, my personal book list is about 55 of various, hunting slash conservation related books. So this is just a little snapshot.
Yeah, and we definitely want to hear about yours
Oh,
too. If you've
100%.
got
Yeah.
a favorite movie, favorite book that we didn't mention, we glossed over, send us a message. We'll check it out, and then on the next one, you'll be sure it'll be on there.
You bet. Yeah, the book, The Nature of Oaks, I had never heard of the book. I've read some of Douglas Tallamy's stuff about, urban gardening and stuff, but I had never seen that book until a participant, we were kind of exchanging some book ideas back and forth, and he kind of recommended that one. So please, always looking for new recommendations. Even if it's, like we said, outside of the hunting sphere, but still kind of tied to the outdoor world, definitely interested.
For sure, for sure. Good time of year to knock some
Yes, it
movies and
is.
books off the list.
Yep. Well, anything else to add, Curtis?
I don't think so. Just make sure you're getting your 2023 hunting and fishing
Mm-hmm.
licenses. Don't forget to get in the deer lotto because once it's gone, it doesn't come back.
Not come back.
And yeah, good luck to the ewes out going turkey hunting. Save some for us older folks, please.
It
But hopefully
looks
you
like
don't
they
have
may have a
too many
little
deer
cold,
out there.
damp weather, so it'll be interesting to see how harvest goes. But should be a good fun time to be out there regardless.
Snow turkey?
Snow
Snow
turkeys.
turkey? I've never got a snow turkey. I want to get a snow turkey someday. That would be fun.
Illinois is a good state for it to happen. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, opening day. Even down here in Champaign, we had 2 or 3 inches of snow. Of course,
Yeah,
I didn't draw that year, so didn't get the opportunity, but it can happen
someday.
someday. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. This has been, the Hunting Illinois podcast. If you want to reach out to us at any point, whether it's book recommendations, movie recommendations, or questions, we're here to help. That's our job. We are your resource. So any question is a good question. So feel free to reach out to us. If not, we'll catch you at the next one.
Keep an eye out on our pages. We got archery events that are about
Coming.
to hit our pages. So watch. We're gonna be holding a whole bunch around Illinois. Bunch of
It'll be a
archery
busy
events.
summer.
Gonna be fun. Gonna be fun.
That it will. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.